Hi, and welcome to Module 2. I am your professor, Dr. English Dowdell, and we're going to talk about reusable layouts, navigation, and thinking like a user. Now, in this module, we're going to be moving from starting a project to structuring a project. Now, up to this point, you've created a basic HTML page and pushed it to GitHub, and that's an important first step. But a real website is never just one page. Now, this module is about intentionally building the framework of your website before we worry about design, styling, or interactivity. Now, if Module 1 was about getting the door open, I want you to think about Module 2 is about laying out the floor plan. Okay, so let's start by talking about the word scaffolding, because this term might be new to some of you. Now, in construction, scaffolding is a temporary structure that allows workers to build safely and consistently. Now, in web development, scaffolding means creating the structured skeleton of a website before the final visuals or functionalities are added. Now, your HTML scaffold answers questions like, what pages does the site have? How do users move between the different pages? What content belongs where? Now, at this stage, your pages don't need to be finished. It doesn't need to have like finished content, but they do need a clear, consistent structure that we can build on later. Now, the key idea in this module is the idea of reusable layouts. Now, reusable layouts means that every page on your site shares the same basic structure. So when a user moves from one page to, say, another page, they shouldn't have to relearn how the site works. Now, in HTML, we create reusable layouts using semantic elements. Now, semantic HTML, it describes the role of the content, not just its appearance. And it uses HTML tags that give meaning to the content inside of them. And they help improve accessibility for screen readers, boost search engine optimization, and makes your code easier to read and maintain. Now, for this module, every page in your project should include these core elements. It should include a header, a nav, a main element, and then a footer element. Now let's briefly talk about what each one of these represents. So the header element, it usually contains the identity of the site, such as for your example or your project, it's going to contain maybe the nonprofit's name or the logo. Now, even if this is placeholder text for right now, its location and purpose should be consistent across every page. So use the header for the top of your page where the site name is going to go and where the logo is going to go. Now, the nav element is one of the most important parts of the scaffold. Navigation tells users what pages exist and how to move between them. So you're going to use the nav to wrap your navigation links. So in this module, your navigation should link to at least 3 pages, like a home page, an about or a mission page, or maybe a contact or another relevant page. Now, navigation should be identical on every page. So if a user clicks About from the home page and then clicks Contact from the About page, the experience should feel seamless. Now the main section, this is where the unique content of each page is going to live. This is probably the only part of your layout that should significantly change from page to page. Now for now, placeholder text welcome to the About Us page is perfectly acceptable. Now what matters is that the structure exists and it makes sense. Now lastly, the footer element usually contains secondary information like copyright text or organizational details, or maybe a simple placeholder at this stage is fine. Like the header and the navigation, the footer should be consistent across all your pages. Now you want to make sure every page uses a consistent and meaningful layout. So these components that we've discussed, these are all part of your HTML pages that are going to be repeated across multiple pages. So think about the websites that you visit every day. You know, the header and the navigation bar, they don't change from page to page. The footer usually kind of looks the same across the entire site. Now, if you're in your nonprofit website that you're going to be doing for your project, you should use the same header and the same nav on every page. And then you're going to reuse the footer on every page. Now, this consistency is going to help users feel oriented, and it saves you time. You know, you won't have to reinvent the wheel for every page. Now, even though we're not using template engines or frameworks in this course, you can copy and paste your layout components into each HTML page or each HTML file to simulate that use or that reuse. Now, one tip I want to give you is get your basic scaffold perfect once, and then you'll reuse it everywhere. Now, let's connect structure to file organization. Now, in assignment 1 for this module, you're creating multiple HTML files. You're going to create an index.html, an about.html, and a contact.html. These files live in the same project, and they should link to one another using relative paths. You'll also begin organizing your project using folders such as a CSS folder or a images folder. Now, even though these folders are going to be mostly empty for right now, just go ahead and create them early because this is going to help establish professional habits and prevent confusion later. Think of this as setting up labeled drawers before you actually start filling them. So here on the right is the recommended structure. So again, you'll have your index.html, your about.html, your contact.html. Then you'll have a folder for CSS, which would contain your style sheets. And then within that folder, you'll have styles.css. And then you'll also, off the root, directory will have an images folder, and this is where you can put your logo and all the other images. Now, this is going to keep your code clean and easy to manage. It also mirrors how real web projects are built. Now, at this point, some of you may be tempted to jump into styling, okay? But there's a reason we're focusing on structure first. Good design can't fix poor structure. So if users can't find what they're looking for, colors and fonts won't save the experience. This is why professional projects always start with structure and planning before visuals. Now, in your nav element, I just want you to remember you're going to include links to each of your different pages, okay? Make sure that these links work, and you're going to use relative URLs like what I'm showing here. Okay, make sure this navigation appears on every page in the same order and with the same look, and that's key to usability. Okay, so far we've been thinking like developers. Okay, now we need to kind of shift and start thinking like users. Now, users don't see your folder structure. They don't care how your HTML is written. Only thing they care about is whether the site helps them accomplish something. And this is where user stories and use cases come in. A user story is a short statement that captures a user's needs from their perspective. It always follows a certain structure. So here at the bottom, I'm kind of showing you that structure. So basically, the way you write it is as a, and then type of user, I want to, and then do something so that, and then their benefit or their reason. And this format forces you to focus on like who the user is, what they want, and why it matters to them. So an example could be, you know, as a visitor, I want to read about the organization's mission so that I know what they stand for. Okay. Another example could be, as a donor, I want to find a donate button, or I want to find a donate button so that I can support the cause quickly. So for assignment 2 for this module, you're going to write 2 user stories related to your nonprofit site. Now, these user stories should directly influence how you think about navigation and page content. If a user story says a donor wants to find information quickly, that suggests that navigation should be clear and consistent on every page to allow them to do that. Now, a use case scenario is a more detailed narrative. It describes how a user will accomplish a task on your site. So it's going to expand on the user story. So instead of a single sentence like we did with the user story, a use case walks through the steps a user is going to take to reach their goal. So your use case should include the type of user, their goal, the steps that they take on your site, and the expected outcome. Now you can write this as a short paragraph, or you can just simply use some bullet points. So let me give you an example. So a case scenario would be a potential volunteer wants to get involved. They go to the home page, click on the Get Involved button, read about volunteer opportunities, and fill out a contact form. They receive a confirmation message. Okay? Now this is different from a user story because, as you could tell, it walks you through the actual flow and interaction. Now this is not a technical document. It's a planning exercise. Now why do we write use case scenarios? Well, they help us think through design and functionality. They can also guide future development, and they can uncover like what needs to be on the page and how users are going to find it. Now, use cases, they help us test our site before it's actually fully built. Now, if the steps feel confusing, on paper, then they might be confusing for a real user, okay? Now, for the assignment, you're going to write one use case scenario for this particular assignment in the module. Okay, so overall, okay, this is where everything in this module kind of comes together, okay? Your HTML scaffold supports your navigation supports your users, and your user stories and use case explain why the site is structured the way that it is. Okay, so these planning tools, they help you avoid building pages or features that don't serve a clear purpose. Okay, so by the end of this module, you should have a multi-page HTML scaffold. You should have consistent navigation across the pages, an organized project structure, two user stories, and one use case scenario. Now this foundation is going to make every future module a lot easier, okay? Now when we add styling, interactivity, and dynamic behavior later, we'll be building on something solid, not guessing as we go. So take your time with this module, okay? Strong structure and thoughtful planning are what separates rushed websites from professional ones. Okay, so just a review for what's required for this modules. You're going to have an assignment where you're going to build your HTML scaffold with navigation. So in this activity, you're going to create a multi-page HTML scaffold for your nonprofit website project. And this is going to serve as the foundation for your full site and should reflect your plan, structure, and navigation. For your second assignment, this is where you're going to, start stepping into like the user's shoes and planning out how the website's going to serve their needs. So you're going to be writing 2 user stories and you're going to have 1 use case scenario. Now, detailed information about both of the assignments, of course, is found in the course room. Other than that, if you run into any problems, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.